Today we're going to be talking about a game that up until 3 or maybe 4 weeks ago I didn't even know existed. That game is called Dance Factory, released for the PS2 in 2006. It was developed by Broadsword Interactive and published by Codemasters. If you've ever played a Dance Revolution game, or DDR for short, or games similar to it, you just feel almost right at home gameplay wise. I also have a treat for my viewers to this video. Thanks to Alma, whom is a friend over on the Stack Exchange network, he made me aware of Simon Goodwin, who is responsible for the proof of concept that ultimately led to Dance Factory being developed. I managed to get in contact with Mr. Goodwin, and he answered some questions regarding design decisions, as well as development decisions and reasonings. We will get more into the details later, but for now, let me give you some more context on Dance Factory. And before I go into that, I'd like to forewarn you that I'm not typically a fan of rhythm games such as DDR, but Dance Factory is an exception to the rule that I was willing to make. With that out of the way, what makes Dance Factory so special? Well, by far and large, its best feature is the fact that its music library is near endless. How it works is you load up the game is then stored into memory. From there you're able to add your own disc, whether it be commercial or your own custom mix CD. And finally, you can choose to have the game generate a single track's moves, or the entire CD all at once. I chose the latter and put together my own disc. Once the moves are generated for that disc or track, the game will not need to generate the moves again for that disc or track, as they are saved to your memory card. Also, it is worth noting that the game itself is stored in memory entirely, so once the game is loaded up, you can take the game out and not have to worry about it for that session. Once you finally get into the actual game, you press the arrows that come on screen, and it's pretty standard rhythm gameplay from there. There is an iToy mode which lets you race and wave your hands around to score more points. And it works semi-well, but the calibration on it was a big pain in the butt, as it took me a long time to get it working properly. And it seems as though the iToy implementation was a little bit of an afterthought. One thing to remember about Dance Factory is really that it was the first of its kind. Not in the gameplay aspect necessarily, but in the moveset generation aspect. No game before did anything quite like that, and even since its release, there have been some games that tackle gameplay generation from user-provided songs such as AudioSurf, which was released in 2008, but I still feel there's something special about physically dancing to a song of your choosing. While Dance Factory is truly unique in its ability to generate gameplay from your own songs, it does have some pitfalls. One of the biggest limiting factors was that the game was designed to be stored in and ran from memory. This is so once you start the game you wouldn't constantly need to swap the game back in and out between music CDs. As a result, some compromises had to be made. This was most notable in the game's somewhat simplistic graphics and some other minor things. At the end of the day, gameplay is what ultimately matters most, but other extras can sometimes flesh out a game more. Dance Factory did have some extra features such as an avatar type thing called a creature, but I didn't see it used much in single player mode. Actually at all. I think it was more of a multiplayer thing. There was also a little mini game that you could play while a song is being generated to pass the time. Let's get back to the limitation of being loaded into memory on a per session basis. There were alternatives such as having to swap the game in and out between discs, but this was not a very good solution as it would likely increase wear and tear, and also be quite the big inconvenience to players. Alternatively, they could have put some content on the PS2 hard disk drive and swap out space and memory, but even then most people didn't own a PS2 hard disk drive, and raising the barrier of entry is generally a terrible idea. So overall, I think that the PS2 is kind of a limiting factor, but overall, the developers made the game work as well as they could given the limitations of the time and the console. One other minor issue with the game was that while the game did generate beats fairly well, sometimes the tempo didn't seem quite right, but this was rare. However, that is a minor complaint, and most songs' movesets felt just right to me. So ultimately, I did like the game, but it left me kinda wanting more. I understand why the game had to be kept in memory, and thus had to be built around that fact. Again though, it is very important to keep in mind that the move generation from any CD mechanic was the first of its kind, and when all said and done, this is a very cool game, and I really hope to see the concept explored further in the future. Alright, so let's talk about some of the challenges that came up during the development of Dance Factory, courtesy of Simon Goodwin's website. If you'd like to visit to read more in depth and read some of his articles, that's linked in the description as they are very interesting. Now if you aren't aware, Simon Goodwin was responsible for the proof of concept that was able to extract beats and interpolate between them. This ultimately led to Codemasters partnering with Broadsword Interactive, and development continued. Jim Finnis and Steve Rose were the developers who coded the dance generator. Another big part of the development process was Q&A testing, which is short for quality assurance testing if you were unaware. According to Mr. Goodwin, each time a new build was ready, the Q&A team had to test more than 1,000 songs over the past 40 years in countless genres. The countless time spent testing, refining, optimizing, and everything that goes into making a commercial title explains why the development process went from concept to release in 3 years. I highly suggest that you read the article that is linked in the description, as it goes into far more detail than I do, as this video is intended to give an overview rather than a huge in-depth analysis of the intricacies of the development of Dance Factory. Overall, it's a fun game that I could definitely see myself bringing over to a friend's place to have a little dance-off with, or something along those lines. However, by far and large, compact discs are dated and most people just stream their music in some form or another, so it might be a hassle if they don't have the album on hand. One day I'd love to see a modern version of Dance Factory or equivalent that has integration for streaming services, but due to legal and licensing issues, I wonder how far off that is. Finally, here are a couple of questions and responses from Simon Goodwin regarding the development of Dance Factory. Question 1. I understand one of the limitations of the game is size, as it is to my understanding that the game is completely stored in memory per session, so the user could swap out albums or discs at their leisure. Do you feel this ultimately led to the gameplay being limited of Dance Factory? Simon's response: a bit, but the dance database could have been many times larger at the expense of just a few textures or video. Consider how a game like this is tested and the implications of adding sequences late in development. I don't think you've quite grasped how ambitious the game is because of its USB works with any CD. Anyhow, swapping the game disc back in twice per song is ergonomically unacceptable in time, mess, and media risk. Ask anyone without an Amiga or other single floppy system. The reset and eject buttons on a PS2 are small and adjacent. More Russian roulette. This was a design decision which Dave Brickley, the producer, took long after talking it over with me, and I think the product could have failed otherwise. Not as much as not being able to get a PS2 TCP/IP stack into RAM, but as only a tiny fraction of people had PS2 internet, and then largely only for SOCOM, it was not as commercial runner regardless of the advantage of being able to share dances, including player-made ones, online. We knew it could be vital, but the PS2 could not deliver the network reach and nobody else had the Redbook CDDA, short for compact disc digital audio access, vital to reading 7 or more times faster than track duration. Putting the up-down arrows in the wrong order for DDR players was the biggest ergonomic fox pass, driven entirely by legal instructions. The global legal risk of making this game cannot be understated. It's a classic problem of tech convergence. Of course it would have been trivial to put them in DDR order, but then Konami could have shut us down. Simple, though silly. The graphics are really not important when you're playing the game. It's about sound and movement. They are functional and varied. Jim Finnis did a good job, though of course more time and money would have delivered more in that respect. Effort went into the animated dancer, fitness modes. iToy support was added expressly and only to get the game approved and listed in the USA. My response: I agree that having swap discs twice per song could have been a deal breaker, and ultimately being able to play multiple CDs without ever having to put the disc back into the system is definitely a big plus. Alamo from Stack Exchange was telling me about the up and down arrow swap, and while I did play some DDR a while ago, and in some arcades I didn't notice it until I looked at them side by side. However, I'm sure more seasoned DDR players would have noticed the change, though, quite quickly. As a follow-up to my first question, was the use of the PS2 hard drive ever considered to aid in loading or expanded content? The release of the PS2 hard drive was kinda close to when the development of Dance Factory started, so I'm not positive on this one. No, we had the hardware and we ignored it, as did the market generally. Nobody trying to make a hit game considers imposing the requirement for optional hardware unless paid to do it by the manufacturer. Commercial software addresses a common platform. It must. The question makes no business sense. How many games used HD on Xbox 360? FIFA, precisely. And that hardware subset was far more common. My response: in hindsight, this question wasn't very well thought out, and I apologize for that. From my understanding, raising the barrier of entry unless absolutely necessary for some reason is usually a bad idea. Question 3. Why do you think only a handful of rhythm/music games have experimented with generating gameplay, i.e. movesets or even levels in some cases, from songs? Simon's response: Point 1, because it's extremely hard to do well enough to be generally fun, with long development times, and requires research as well as development, which few game companies have the staff or time or money to afford, especially given the hardware media fashion risks. Point 2, because Cody's have demonstrated and patented and are ready to license quite a few neat ways to do it which I invented for them. Point 3, digital rights management on a subset of content. See, the common platform. My response. To point 1, I remember playing a game called AudioSurf that was able to import songs from your computer, but I remember the gameplay got repetitive somewhat quickly. Point 2, I agree. Point 3, I would love to see a game take advantage of something like Spotify, Pandora, whichever streaming service you prefer, but I imagine licensing and the legal aspects that go with that would make it hard to near impossible. Question 4. I tried to push the limits of the generator and told it to generate a song that was nearly 20 minutes long. It got about 70% to 80% of the way through, and then the console had hard locked on me. What likely went wrong here? Simon's response: glad you've been trying. You can definitely do 78-minute tracks consistently on a clean disk/drive. Disk error most likely. Interaction of drive and media is likely what went wrong there. The memory is statically allocated to map in an absolutely full standard CD with tracks up to 99 of any size. This stuff gets very exhaustively tested before release, in our case by ambitious ex-aerospace Q&A testers. You can't afford to make a million $10 coasters, even for games that depend on 10-cent ones. Mind you, Q&A did get through a lot of drive and test kits, normally access to periphery fails due to spindleware. Well, that was all of the questions I had for Mr. Goodwin and all of his responses. It was really nice, and it was very great to gain some perspective from someone who worked in a commercial release like Dance Factory. A very unique one at that, given its unique ability to take songs from any CD virtually and produce gameplay based off of them. Also, Simon requested I give a shout out to Justin Forrest, who worked as a game designer at Codemasters. So there's that. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed discussing Dance Factory and the development behind it with Mr. Goodwin, and I had a lot of fun making the video.